Benjamin can have love for the truckie. Beautiful minds, but we love getting ugly. Risk takers with a clover, man, we love getting lucky. You run, we chase fire, I love when it ducks me. Tones go off, house watch, read the address out. 1075, get up off the magic couch. 500 gallons prepared for the baddest drought. Who else you want on the way when disaster's out? Can't even get a little bit rattled when you enter with exit apparel. Mayday, member down, they'll drag you. You won't get this from every Tom, Dick, and Harry, but here's a view from the top floor with Mickey Farrell.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of A View from the Top Floor. Today's episode, I'm incredibly honored to have retired Lieutenant Tim Klett out of 88 Engine in the Bronx. Tim started his career in Connecticut, then followed his childhood dream to New York City, where he was assigned at a Proby school to 47 Engine in Lower West Harlem. Then he made his way up to Central Harlem in 69 Engine, and then ultimately he made his way to 88 Engine in the Bronx, where he did 19 years as lieutenant. If you know anything about Tim Klett, you know he loves the fire service probably more than anyone on earth. That said, we talk about that. We talk about his love for the job. We talk about history, tradition, honor, and standards. We also break down a case study of a cellar fire he had and the systematic method of what it ultimately takes to be successful fighting cellar fires. So, no further ado, here's Lieutenant Tim Klett, 88 Engine. Hope you enjoy it. Tim, thanks for joining me. I really appreciate you coming on, man.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. It's been a long time coming.
So we were just in Virginia together doing the training days, so that was an incredible opportunity to get to talk a little bit, to catch up, and I actually got to sit in your lecture, which was an honor, and I learned so much. I wish I had that when I was UFO in the engine company before I went to the truck, because there was so much value in it that I could have used at certain fires that stand out. So you're doing great work with these engine lectures, man. So let's talk about where you get started.
Well, I started in a little place in Connecticut called Newington Volunteer Fire Department. My father was a member there. He was a cop by trade, but that was my indoctrination in the fire service. Very, very, very young. I knew what I wanted to do. It was the busiest all-volunteer department in the state at the time, and we definitely did our share. And then, I knew I wanted to be a paid fireman, so I started taking tests everywhere, and I got hired with the City of New Britain, which is the home of Stanley Tool. It's an old New England mill town. We were 8 engines, 2 trucks. Eventually, they added a rescue to that. And again, we did our share over there with not a lot of staffing, and I continued to test. My goal was to be a New York City fireman. And finally in 1990, I got called for the New York City Fire Department. It was my second time through. I actually took the 82 test and didn't do so well. So I hunkered down the second time around and made it work.
And you went to 47 Engine out of the academy?
Yes, I went to 47 Engine. I had a friend. It was actually trying to get me up to 69 right out of Proby school, but it was very hard to get there. And there was already a Proby going there, and in those days they didn't want to put in those real busy places 2 Probies in the same place at the same time. So he asked me if I wanted to go to a very good engine in the 5th Division, and I said, "Listen, you're the guy, and he did. He put me in a very, very good place. 47 Engine was a really great place. I really enjoyed it there. I was just looking for more first to work. We went to plenty of fires, but I was just looking for the first do work, and 47 was a big time second, third do engine. Went to a ton of fires, getting the second line. And in those days in Harlem, there was always fire on the floor above. But the only reason I left there had nothing to do with the guys, nothing to do with the company. It was just, I was chasing fires is what I was doing.
Yeah, I've worked there a bunch of times, and it's funny you say that, how great guys have worked there, because you look at the pictures on the wall, you're like, wow, that guy worked here, that guy worked here, that guy worked there, and they're all outstanding firemen who had incredible careers. I think we should bring back the 5th Division. That's what we should do.
I do. The old 5th Division was there wasn't really a bad company in the 5th Division at all.
Yeah.
And it was a small division.
Yeah, a small division, and it was focused on fire duties, and that was it.
Yes, it was.
So then you moved up to 69 Engine. What year did you go to 69?
I went to 69 at the end of 92. I was about a year and 8 months, year and 9 months in 47. And I went up actually what they call an onion skin. I don't know if they don't do them really anymore. But I went up there in late 92 on an onion skin, and I was finally assigned in actually 96. So I was on almost a 4-year onion skin to 69. Yeah.
So who were the officers when you got there?
In 69, John Newell. John Newell's the man. No, hands down, no question about it. He's great. Rich Killian was there. Pat Wellaby was there. Jack Coor had a spot, but it was a UFO spot, and it was open for 20 years in 69. So it was great for 69 because they could really run officers through that UFO spot, pilot test them or audition them if you want. You know, I'm trying to think who the other, it was Killian, Newell, Joe Flanagan. Yeah, Joe Flanagan was up there. In the truck, Vinny Leahy, Tommy Armstrong, Mike Finan was the captain at the time, and Patty Brown was actually in 28 when I got up there. And
so these are the real warrior firefighters that we've all romanticized and read about. But these are the guys, and these are your firsthand experience to go into fires from these guys, man.
And the chiefs there were truly the guys. I mean, we had Cassidy and Kennedy, both from 82 and 31. And then we had Nick Visconti, God rest his soul, he just passed away, from 50-2. And we had Frank Griffin from, Squad 2, 29 truck. I mean, those were the true, those guys were, nothing rattled those guys. They were the best chiefs in the universe.
What's special about 69 and 28 to this day is that there was a standard set all the way back then, and it still applies today. It's important that these good firehouses maintain that standard, and we're losing those standards across the board. But throughout the job, it's getting worse and worse. I see firsthand incredible trucks or engines that were outstanding places to be, and it's kind of the standards fallen, and that's the bottom line. And there's no way around admitting that, but that's the truth of the matter. Standards have fallen. Yeah,
and there's one word, and that's in my book, accountability. I mean, when I was in 69, and I could tell you a quick story, you were held accountable for what you did. I mean, back in those days, there was a lot that was allowed to go on in the firehouse, but you had to do your job. And they had this thing they called tradition. And after every job, you'd go to the top floor, and you'd have to say what you did, and they would grill guys. If you had the OV, you're like, what'd you do when you got there? How'd you get there? Why'd you go that way? And I had a fire one night. We had the entire flat, 6 rooms. And I get into the last room, the very last room, and I run out of gas. So I just hand it off to the backup guy. He finishes off the last room, put the fire out. And we come back to quarters, and they laid into me for giving up the nozzle. It's your fire, you put it out. If you can't put it out, go somewhere else. And I think companies held, they wanted that standard, and they held their firefighters. The firefighters held the firefighters to a higher standard. The officers didn't even have to get involved. And if it got bad enough, and the chiefs had to sit you down, and we had one fire up there that Cassidy sat both company down, and it was just one of those fires that came along. It was just they had set the place up. They had made it very difficult for us to get to the fire, and it took a long time. We ended up putting it out, but it took a long time. And when the chief was not yelling at you, but explaining how it could have gone better, you actually felt like you let your father down. You felt terrible about it. It wasn't like, you just blew it off. You actually walked out of that kitchen like, holy cow, I let this guy down. And that's gone. That accountability about how you operate, how well you do your job, how well you make your company look is gone. I think that, the standard that people use now for whether they did a good job or not is, well, the fire went out.
Yeah.
And that's not a standard. Every fire goes out. So that can never be the standard of how you operate, the fact that the fire went out,
Something you just said that I find with good places is that the men hold each other accountable, not the officers. And that's what runs a good shop, is when you have accountability amongst the men, you have leadership within the men. It's all about the men, and the officers will lead you.
Yeah.
When you're in a good place, there's not much to lead because the men are right there with you.
That's the value of having a very good senior man in the firehouse. Yeah. And I know the job has kind of lost their love for the senior man. And I always say he's like the sergeant major in the military. He handles all those things so it doesn't get to the officer, because I tell guys, if it gets to my office, it's probably a problem.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And if it gets out of the firehouse, it surely is a problem. If we can keep things in the firehouse, we will. And that was the value of a good senior man, not only taking care of problems, but making sure that the turnouts were the way they were. That's not my job. If I have to step in, I will. But the senior man, he sets that tone for how that company turns out, how they operate. I always said, like stretch and hose. It's like signing your name to a check. It's your signature. As an engine company, that's your signature of whether you're a good company or not. Not how you put out fires. It's how you stretch hose. The truck was, to me, the truck was always how you overhauled the room.
Oh yeah,
If you went in that room and you saw, lath hanging from the ceiling and the mattress still sitting on the floor, you're like, this is some shit shop truck.
yeah.
They didn't take any pride in how they overhauled that room.
That's definitely a lost art. Trimming windows, pulling
Yep.
ceilings, that all concept it's been lost completely, especially trimming windows. There's nothing more that gets under my skin when if you miss a fire or you get relocated maybe, or you're just cruising around and you see a building that's not trimmed out with windows. It speaks volumes for that truck company. And it
Yeah.
speaks volumes for, you get relieved in the fire for it, but I don't let my guys go out until we trim those windows. Unless it's like an ass kicking job, even then, you still go back in
Yep.
and you overhaul and you make sure it's up to your par, because they don't care who was the last truck was at that job. It's whoever was the first due truck.
That's right. That is 100% right. Now, who was first due? They don't care if there were 3 trucks in that room after you. Who was the first due truck? It's funny you say that. I used to cringe driving away from jobs and looking at the building and see shattered glass in the windows that wasn't cleaned out. And we're not even talking about cleaning out, the burnt part of it. Just the glass that's in the window, the shards of glass hanging there. And no one's going back. It's just, I don't know if it's lazy. I don't know what it is. Like you said, it's truly a lost art of how a truck goes in an overhauls room. Same thing with stretching.
Going back to the senior guy, how important that is, having a good one. Most time the senior guy, especially in the truck, he's the chauffeur. He maintains the turnout, or it sets that standard for turning out. So I believe that the chauffeur, especially in the truck, he's the eyes and ears or the ambassador of the fireground for the fire officer. He's maintaining the outside team. He's keeping an eye on that. He's giving reports to his officer. Such an important role. The MPO, I think that's the most stressful job on the fireground within the first few minutes, obviously. And that's the guy that he gets overlooked many times. Many times the chauffeur is overlooked in the engine company. But that guy, it all falls on him, man. Him and then the control guy right there with him. So.
And it's funny you use that word ambassador, because I've used it like if you work for a weak captain, like as a lieutenant, I'm the captain's ambassador. And just as, like you said, when I'm there, the senior man is my ambassador.
Yeah.
And that's how it works. That's it's an unwritten chain of command on how a company is run, based on the captain and then the 3 lieutenants being his voice piece when he's not there. They're his policies. That was my biggest regret, was not being a captain, because then it would have been my company. It would have been my rules. It would have been run my way. We would have drilled a certain way. And the lieutenants would have had to follow that, because they're my voice piece, just as the senior man are the lieutenant's voice piece, that bridge between the office and the apparatus floor.
Let's take it to a fire you had now. We wanted to talk about cellar fires and basement fires. What's that? Oh,
Which one?
Yeah. But we wanted to talk about basement fires and cellar fires, but there's a particular fire that stands out, I know, in your career and job-wide, known as the fire that 88 and 38 kicked ass at. So before we get into the actual fire, what's your definition of basement versus cellar? Because I know nationwide we have different terminologies and whatnot. Our books are a little bit different. They've been changed over the years. Regarding to this fire, you used the word cellar.
Because we were totally below grade. I think that hinge pin is a basement. He's either half above or half below. Probably a walkout, is more of a basement than it is a cellar. A cellar is, like totally below grade. And we did get in trouble with some terminology at a fire where they were calling it a basement and it was actually the cellar. And not to get into that, but I think that, if we're going to use those 2 terms, we have to define what each one is. Do you know what I mean? In a place that doesn't have, like a brownstone will have a basement and a cellar. So either we start calling the basement level the first floor and the cellar the basement, or vice versa. But we really have to verify where we are, especially once we below grade. And I know, like, in Midtown, we'll have subcellars, and the trade center was 7-8 stories down. So we have to label that right, because labeling a building, once we label a building, and the fire department doesn't control that, the building controls that. We label a building 1, 2, 3, 4, A, B, C, D, but once we go vertical or subterranean, the building's going to control that labeling. We can't change it. One Meridian Plaza in Philadelphia was a 31-story building with 29 floors, because it had lobby, mezzanine 1, and the building controls that. We have to play within those bounds. So when we're labeling cellar, basement, we really need to know the difference between the 2.
I think the main takeaway for that on a national level is have a localized standard that everyone's operating within the same language and the same understanding. So even if you come from another department, they call for an extra engine or truck, we have to be on the same page. So within a county or a state or whatever it is, try to come to an agreement of what standard you're using as far as language.
Yeah, and I'm not going to get into the big debate about the unified command and some of the terminology we use about, I always say if you go to an EMS run and the victim's on the second floor, what do you say? The second floor. If you go to a water leak and the water leak's on the second floor, what do you say? Water leak's on the second floor. If you go to a stuck elevator, second floor, what do you call it? It's on the second floor. The only time it's Division 2 is when it's on fire. It just doesn't make any sense.
Makes zero sense. They try to Fireground Communications.
We're opening Pandora's box here,
that. But like Fireground Communications, they've tried to like pigeonhole us into a book of vocabulary that makes zero sense. You can have the same terminology for a tanker on fire, crashed into a building, or a mattress fire. You can't have the same terminology. We have to speak clear text statements, and it's so much simpler. And we try to complicate things, so you add a little bit of stress. Every fire has stress, but when we try to complicate things, that's when firemen die because of miscommunication.
Yep. 100%. Like we had and where I was a volunteer, we had a 1 million square foot warehouse and we had a guard shack at the gate, and we got a call for a structure fire at the warehouse. Now the dispatcher knew that it was the guard shack. It was a 5x5 guard shack. But you think, okay, now we got a 1 million square foot warehouse going because they call it a structure fire. Like the dispatchers know what the caller said. No one ever is going to pick up the phone at 2 a.m. and say, hey, my structure's on fire. They know what it is. Just use common terminology and let's end this madness. It's crazy.
I feel like sometimes the dispatchers want to hype you up, even though they know the reality of it. But that's a whole different avenue.
Yes, it is. It's a Pandora's box.
Yes. So take me to the fire. So it was close to quarters, right? What time of day was it?
It was right at the change of tours, just after 6 o'clock, still light out. I'd literally just probably 15 minutes earlier relieved the captain. And we get the run for smoke, and it's, on 182 to Crotona, take a right on Crotona and go down 5 blocks. It's right there. And as I'm coming down Crotona, I can see a little haze in the street. So, I wasn't a guy that I never, pulled that gun or transmitted anything. I wanted to be sure. I wasn't going to be the guy that rescind that 1075, so I told the guys in the back, we might have something. And we pulled up, and then you could see there was smoke pushing out of just about every orifice in the front of the building. Not black smoke, but there was good enough smoke for me to transmit a 1075.
On arrival, what are some indicators you look for a cellar fire or fire below grade?
Well, there's a multitude of them. Smoke pushing on the window frames, under the threshold. If I have a lot of smoke and no visible fire, I'm always hyper vigilant to eliminate the cellar. So if I don't see any fire anywhere, so if I got all that smoke and I don't have any fire in the first or second or third floor in that building, I'm not automatically going to think it's a cellar fire, but I'm automatically going to try to rule it out. I want someone to check that cellar to be sure it isn't in there, because there's been a huge uptick in the American Fire Service over the last 4 or 5 years of cellar fires where guys are going through the floor into the cellar and getting killed. There's been like 6 in the last 10 years.
From the truck standpoint, it's so important that we have to pay attention to details, and that's what we've gotten away from, is that the devil is in the details of everything we do. Yep. So whoever's going to the rear, for us it's the OV, whoever does your 360, if that's something you do, slow down and take a look in those basement windows and see what you have.
Yes.
But at the time, they used to say, kick the window in. If smoke comes out, you got to fire. I'm not saying go and do that, but I'm saying pay attention to the details, because that's an urgent message. You have to get that out there and say, we have fire in the cellar. I had a fire once in a vacant, and they were stretching a line to the attic because it was showing on arrival out the windows on the attic. Yeah. Happened to go over the rear, and it was fire in the cellar. Balloon frame, old home. So you have to get that out there. That you have to get the information out
and that's
clearly.
A critical failure for an engine, because like anybody can stretch hose, but the problem is when an engine commits a line before they know where the fire actually is. Then that's what causes problems. That's what gets people killed. If you're not sure, you stretch to cover the building, and you do not, until you're sure it is, you do not commit that line anywhere until you know for sure, right? If I know I'm going to the first floor, I can stretch for the first floor fire. But if I got that 3-story building and it's showing smoke out of every crack, every orifice, I'm going to stretch to cover the building, but I'm not going to commit till I know exactly where the fire is.
So
because I'm not going to get myself in trouble.
So on arrival, change of tours, still light out. You pull up, heavy smoke, no fire.
I get to the front door, and Captain Mitchell, Doug Mitchell from 38 Truck, they were right behind me. And it's kind of a funny story. So we get, and I'm already thinking, okay, this thing's probably in the cellar. Based on the smoke on the first floor, and I did have some smoke pushing around the stringers of the stairs to go to the second floor. If you the stairway to the second floor was right inside the front door, and you could see smoke pushing up through the treads and the stringer. The stringers are what hold the risers and the treads. So I saw some smoke pushing up. So I'm thinking cellar fire. But then a guy was coming out of the building with his parrot, and Doug asked him,
Only in the Bronx.
Yeah, do you know where the fire is? And he said it's in the cellar. And
See, that's another takeaway right there is ask the people leaving the building, where's the fire?
Yes.
Right.
And then if you can, here's a big thing that people don't realize about cellars. If you do have an occupant there and they do say it's in the cellar, the next question out of your mouth should be, is it a finished space? Because it's the difference between a room and contents fire or a building fire. Because if it's unfinished, that means the ceilings are probably exposed, and any body of fire in that cellar is now going to communicate to the building quite rapidly. And if it's an older building, like I said, a balloon frame, now you got all those problems that are associated with that. So that's the next question. Once he says, hey, it's in a cellar, I want to know if it's a finished cellar, because if it's finished, it might be a little tougher, but it buys me some time.
That's such a great takeaway, because every fire has a different tempo, and in building construction, we read Vinny Dunn, and it's all great stuff, but we have to remember that building construction determines, in our world, during the moment of the fire, is speed versus velocity of that fire, and it's all about timing. You're in a frame, the tempo is very different than if you're in a project. So private dwelling, knowing if that basement is finished or not, that'll change the tempo of that fire instantly.
Yes, 100%. And, knowing building construction, I can always, you never know for sure, but you need a starting point to where to look for any extension. And if I know how buildings put together, I know how it's going to get into that building. And those are areas I can check right away. Like people, they'll open up walls above windows on the second floor. I mean, and that's not no, it's not into the walls at all. Well, you're above a window. It's a natural fire break. You've got to move over a couple of bays and open up there. And then you get the true thing. So if you understand how, buildings put together, you can narrow down your search for that extension, if there is any.
Yeah, that's a great point. So let's talk about the stretch now.
So, the one thing that's difficult about that cellar stretch is that, and some places do it, and I don't advocate it. I'm never going to go into the fire area without water. I'm just not going to do it. It's rolling the dice. So we charge the line at the front door, which means we had to bring it in past the stairway, come around behind the stairs, and then flake it out for the advance down the stairs, charged. But I'm not going to bring a knife to a gunfight. I'm not going to go in there without water and put myself in an undefendable position. And anybody that thinks that they can go in there, flake it out quickly, and charge that line, we have history. I'm not going to bring up the fire because I'm not going to point fingers, but of companies going in with a dry line at a cellar fire and, cost the lives of firefighters. So I'm just not willing to take that risk. And that's any fire. Even if the fire's on the second floor and I can stretch to the top of the stairs dry, which some people say they do all the time, I'm not going to do that. It's 12 feet. If I can't move a charge line 12 feet, I should be a truck driver. So we stretch in, and just a little caveat. I've been doing, I work at a place in Indianapolis. You've heard Jimmy McCormick's place, the Fire Department Training Network.
Yeah.
And we started doing basement fire training there, 15 years ago. So I always do the engine. I built this engine program. And it was funny, after the fire, it was like I was at the top of the stairs at the training prop at a real fire. Because the things I was saying to my two guys in '88, Al Torado and Joe Persinger, was the exact same thing I was telling the students at this thing I'd done for 15 years, and it was so nonchalant. And I think that's maybe one of the reasons we went down those stairs, because I had done it so many times in training. And the caveat is that even to me, who's been teaching for a long time, proved the value of consistency in our training, because that was the day, and I was the guy that was doing the training on it. And that was the day that it paid the dividend for me to be able to make those decisions, set that company up to make that push down the stairs. The guys were great, though. They did everything I asked them to do.
Was that cellar door open or closed?
So Dougie found the door first, and he opened the door, and fire blew it out in the first floor. So the fire had pretty much possession of the cellar and the cellar stairs. So the first thing I did, and again, I would advocate this if you go to one of these fires, is and an engine guy usually doesn't do this, but I called the OV, 38's OV. And you know what I was going to ask? Had he made it to the rear yet? And was there another way into the cellar? I needed to know that, because my window was starting to close with the amount of fire coming up the stairs.
Yeah.
He radioed back. He wasn't able to get back there because now fire had vented out a couple cellar windows, and the pathway to the rear was very small, and the fire was blocking his way to get to the rear. So he had to go all the way down the corner and around like 4 or 5 buildings to get to the rear, or up and over. But it was a 3-story frame, so up and over didn't work for him.
Something I want to emphasize on that cellar door is whoever finds it doesn't have to be the truck boss. It could be the probie on the can. Whoever finds that door, close that door, and make sure everyone knows where the cellar is. We have fire in the cellar, and don't leave that door until you physically pass that off to the engine officer.
To the engine officer. Bravo. Bravo. Well, and I'll tell anybody that watches this that's an engine officer, I don't care what door it is. If your first due, it's your line going through that door. If it's the front door of the house, if it's the door to the room on fire, or if it's the door to the cellar, you want control of that door. If the truck finds it, and I told Doug, give me the door. I want the door. That way, and I told him, I'll let you know when we're going to go. If he's now removed from here doing a search on the first floor, and I did, I radioed Doug or yelled out to Doug, but listen, we're going to make our push. I'm opening the door. So they knew that conditions were going to change rapidly on that first floor once I opened the door. But as the engine officer, if you're going to bring your line through a doorway, you want control of the door, 100%.
Yeah. And I've left a firefighter at the door, and I've told them, and I've drilled on this prior, so that they know exactly what I'm speaking of in the moment, was if I say stay at the door for whatever reason, wind conditions, experience level, I just wanted a guy at the door, I tell him, you can leave there once you pass the door off to the engine officer. Nobody else, because he's not leaving. That officer's there, he's committed, and he's going to cross the threshold,
Yep. And that's that bond also of like when the trucks say, hey, they look at the first engine officer, and they look right in the eye and they go, I'm going above.
Yeah.
And when you look at that guy and you say, hey, I got you, that means a lot. That means a lot. You just can't abandon that position with those guys above, and you can't abandon that door with guys on the first floor either. So
I feel we're losing legacy in the fire service. So that's why battalion events are important, because you have to build that relationship with your companies, because if you're the second due truck, your life relies on the first due engine that is not usually in quarters with you.
I got you aren't just words. They mean something.
Yeah.
Like people outside this job don't understand that. But when and Mickey comes up and he says to me, I'm going above, and I go, Mickey, I got you. That means something, and when I always say that, who are we really saying that to? When I look at you and I say, hey, you're going above, I got you. When you look at me and I look at you and we say those words, I got your back. We're telling the civilians also. We're not telling them directly, but we're telling, we got you too. By me looking in your eyes, say, I got you, that means you can go do your job and not be afraid of something happened below you, that I got your back. So that's a big thing. They're just not words to me. They mean something.
And when you say, Mickey, I got you, you're not telling me necessarily. You're telling my wife and kids, I got them.
Yes, I got you.
He's coming home. He's coming home. The only place I'm going is to the burn center if he's upstairs. For the
sake of sounding dramatic, I mean, it's not, but it's powerful because it is. I mean, unless you've ever been put in that position where a guy looks and says, hey, I got you. Man, that means something. And just like at the top of the stairs, when I told the guys in 88, you could say you could tell they were a little iffy about going down the stairs, and we'll talk about that push. But when I told them, and what they told me afterwards, and it really meant a lot to me, is that he goes, the only reason we went was because it was you. And I thought that meant a lot, out of me. But they were great. And I don't think there's, to be honest with you, 5 engines in the city that might have gone down those stairs.
Nobody wants to go to a cellar fire. They'll say they do until they get there, and then it's shit.
Till they get there.
All right, so let's bring the line in. We got the charge line in. We're going to flake it out now.
So all we did, like what I'm concerned of, and I think anybody needs to be concerned about a cellar fire is, once you know the run of the stairs, if they run from the front to the back or the back to the front, normally it's you're running toward the front of the building. So that initial flake out, there's no way you're going to flake out enough line up there for the entire run down the stairs, the turn, and then the push to the back of the stairs. We would have needed 2 links up there to do that. So the only thing I'm really concerned at, and I think officers should only, you want to make it through the push down the stairs. That's one. And you got to have enough hose to make the turn at the bottom of the stairs. So if you put 15, a half link, 20 feet, 25 feet in line with the stairway to make that push down, it's enough to get you down the stairs and make that turn. And once you make that turn, you're putting some good water down range also. But if you don't flake out enough, if you say, 10 feet's enough and we get stuck halfway down those stairs, that's a real bad position to be in. So, the guys in 88, I told them, listen, flake out enough to get down the stairs. And then I told Al, I said, you're going to have to flow to get down the stairs. So we flowed. I told him to put a little extra hose out in front of him than normal. Normally we want like a foot to a foot and a half. I told him to add an extra feet. Just put 2 feet, 2.5 feet out ahead of you. And the reason I told him to do that was as we went down the stairs, as we got lower, that line, because of the line being up behind it, wants to straighten itself out. So in order for him to keep that line up where he needed to be, as he got lower on the stairs, he added an extra foot to make that turn. Once he was in the cellar, he can move back up to that original position. But just for that 12-foot run of the stairs, put a little extra hose around in front of you, and as you get lower, you can keep that nozzle pointed up where you need it to be. And that's exactly what he did. Went down in his butt, and I told the backup guy, I said, I'm going behind him. So the order is going to be always going to be the nozzle first. In a cellar fire where you're going to either have to flow or it's too punishing for the truck to get down there ahead of you. And I don't advise ever for a truck to go down ahead of you. But so it was the nozzle, then me, and then the backup. But the backup needed to wait until we were down and out of the stairs. I didn't want him in that stairway with us in case something happened, in case conditions really changed. If we had to beat feet, and really once you start that push, it's hard to turn around. But once we were down, then the backup guy came back down, we reunited, and we became that traditional nozzle team again.
Something I think is important that you explain is, did you call for that backup man, or did he instinctually know when to go? Because a lot of times Proby has the backup, the detail has the backup. When does he go? Now, are you calling him, or should you just know?
Well, I called out to him to come down only because of the condition of the stairway and the amount of smoke that was coming up the stairs. I didn't know if he could see us. But I think he realized, based on the amount of hose that was going down the stairs, and I told him, lean into that hose. Don't let us change our mind. Help us get down the stairs. And once we stopped moving forward, I think that's a pretty good clue that we're down and out of the stairway and he could make his way down. But I did yell up and said, hey, Joe, come on down. And then actually, Dougie Mitchell followed him down the stairs also.
Did he take his inside team with him?
Eventually I think they were down there, but I don't remember them down there. And he really helped me out a lot once we got down the stairs. We had some issues with radio. The battalion was going to put a line in the cellar window because it was auto extending up the side of the building. And we were in the cellar, and you know as well as I do, if they'd put a line in the window, it might have done some damage to us. So I'm trying to get through on the radio. And that's another thing, especially when we get to cellar fires. I think chiefs got to understand, they're always waiting to hear water in a fire. Right? They should wait to hear a few things. Me calling for water on a fire, primary search is complete. But if we add the cellar dynamic to it, he's got to wait for us to say, hey, we're in the cellar. We've made it down the stairs. I think that's an important aspect of those fires because they're very apt to try to darken it down via a cellar window if there isn't another opening to get in there. And we couldn't get through to let them know that we had, actually made it into the cellar. And finally we did, but like I said earlier, we had to use a few expletives to get his attention, and we stopped him from the window.
I think a good takeaway is exactly what you just said. If you're the engine officer and you make the cellar, get on the radio. First thing you do.
We're in the basement. We're in the cellar.
We're here. We made it. What were the conditions like when you got to the bottom of the stairs versus the top of the stairs?
So, they just like I say at the class, it's really bad. You got to eat, once you open the door to make that move, you got to make that move. And really, one of the reasons we did make the move, we were told there was a family on the second floor. They hadn't found another entrance in yet. So like I said, my options were rapidly, going away from me. So we had to make the call to get down those stairs. Once we did that, the conditions at the top of the stairs, it's always really bad. And that's what I tell guys. You're at the top of the flue. It's really, really bad. And one other thing is you got the timing of going down the stairs. If I pull that door open and if my nozzle man had dove down the stairs, he probably would have ended up getting burned. So I told him, I said, I'm going to open the door, wait a couple seconds. Let's let this thing do what it wants to do. Because most cellar fires, the first ventilation point is going to be that doorway at the top of the stairs. And that cellar is going to react to that. So it blew out over our heads on the first floor, and then it kind of went away a little bit. And he said to me later on, he goes, when you told me that, I didn't understand it. And then I saw what happened. When I opened the door, it blew out. It kind of relaxed a little bit, and then we made our push. So it's really bad. And as you go down the stairs, it gets better, and then it gets bad again at the bottom of the stairs, and then gets better.
From a truck standpoint, you have to realize that conditions are going to get drastically worse for a few seconds when that door opens before they start flowing water. And then it's going to get hotter anyway when you're searching on the floors above, because essentially you're starting your attack with the engine on the floor above the fire.
Yes.
And so you're searching the floor above the fire. And now we're opening a flue to the floor above the fire.
Yep.
And if you're searching that area, and if anything happens, you lose that door, the nozzle man fucking falls over, whatever it may be, conditions are going to get drastically worse.
Yeah.
You know, everything's about timing. I think it's just important to have an understanding when that moment's about to happen.
Yeah.
Maybe as a truck officer say, guys, we're opening the door. You know, everyone's on the same page, you know?
Yeah. And that's funny you said that, because that I didn't, besides telling Doug, yelling to Doug that I was opening the door, there were companies above. And I thought about it later on, and that's one of my takeaways that I really beat myself up over, is that I didn't get on the radio and say, hey, we're opening the door, we're heading down the cellar. That would have accomplished two things. The chief would have known we were on our way down, and I would have advised everybody above that, hey, the conditions are going to change. It doesn't mean the place is taken off. It just means that we've done something, to make those conditions where you are change.
Yeah.
You know, and I never called the companies above, and I kind of felt bad about that. And that was one of my big takeaways from that, about communication wise.
So you're at the bottom of the stairs, you get down, the backup man meets you. Now you're going to make the push to the seat of the fire. I think something that's important that you should talk about is that you can operate a line, not necessarily have water on the fire. You can have water on fire, but not on the fire. So that's an important understanding as an engine officer, when to give that proper transmission, because now you made it to the bottom. You put water on some fire to get down, but now you got to make a push to the seat of the fire.
So, you know, a lot of times we're just driving some of the byproducts of that fire back, so we can get to that area that's on fire. You know, that's why the nozzles should always be at the ceiling, because that's where those byproducts are. You know, the fire's not going to run along the floor to get you. You know, so it is a timing thing. Like, it's easy when you don't have a big open area. You know, like if you got a bedroom on fire, you turn into that room, chief, I got water in the fire. When you have an area that's undefined, and you start putting water downrange into that cellar. And, you know, that was the thing. Once we decided to flow down the stairs, we turned that corner and we didn't stop flowing. And the funny thing was, I thought we had only gone about 5 or 6 feet. And I told Dal to shut the line down. And we had actually gone about 30 feet down the cellar when I told him to shut the line down. And I still hadn't said we had water in the fire. And Doug was right behind me with the thermal imager. The engines didn't have one. And I asked Doug, I go, what do you see? Because we still couldn't see. It was still hot. And he came right over my shoulder with the thermal imager. We had one more room of fire that we had to kind of go past and then come back to get. And once we made that turn, I told the chief, listen, we got water in the fire, and it looks like we got it knocked down.
Was there ever a second means of egress confirmed during this fire?
Much later on in the rear, there was another exterior stairway, but it was a full stairway down.
Okay.
Yeah, in the rear. That fire was actually venting out.
Is that when the chief was going to put that line of operation down?
There was a window about halfway back that blocked the alleyway for the OV to get back there. That's the window he was going to put it in, not the door farther down. So the OV never got, and that's another thing I didn't do, is I never called the OV again to confirm. And that's another takeaway, is that if early on you don't confirm another way out, because they haven't, if you have the information, hey, there's no other way out of here. But if it's undefined and you get in that basement, you got to remember to ask again.
Yeah,
you got to confirm.
I had to fire.
Yeah,
no, I had to fire something similar in a taxpayer, and we were crawling in. I was the engine officer, and I get right on the radio, and I said, no, engine 1 to ladder 1 OV, is there a second means of egress in the rear? And he came back, he said, no, there's none. So I come right over the radio, and I said, engine 1 to all units operating, one way in, one way out, and no second means of egress. People looked at me like I had 3 heads after the fire. That's important information.
It certainly is.
It's odd the engine officer to be calling the first 2 OV, but in that moment, the engine officer's thinking about that.
Well,
so that
I did it. I would do it every day if I had to.
And that for the truck guys, when you hear that transmission of no second means of egress, well, we're so quick to just dismiss the line, especially guys that never worked in an engine. It's important to have line orientation when you realize there is no second means of egress. Mm-hmm. So where's that line? Because that line ultimately is the only way in. Pumps to pumps, all that kind of stuff that, we kind of, learned behavior. We kind of dismiss when you go to the truck because we're operating off instinct, but getting back to that line and knowing where it is so, so important when there's only one way in and one way out.
Yeah. And I think that's, that's part of, like you said, the change in the fire services. A lot of people would look at what you said. Hey, all companies only one way in, way out. Listen to the guy, he's grandstanding. And, that's not grandstanding. It's being proactive. Like if anybody's ever been to a fire that went south, it doesn't happen in slow motion. It happens on a flip of a dime. And if you don't have that information ahead of time, that little tidbit of, hey, this is the only way out, and shit goes south, now you're sitting there trying to figure it out on the fly. And I was always proactive in the way I flaked out my hose, proactive in the way I operated in long hallways, counting doorways, because the swing of the door of a stairway is the same as the apartment. So, if that door to your stairway is closed, I could beat my head against a locked door that I think's the stairway because it swings the same way. So I was always counting doorways, and people they consider it grandstanding. And I was always proactive in my thinking. If something went wrong, what were my alternatives?
There's so much bullshit on a radio at a fire that getting important information out gets difficult at times. So in this fire, they were talking about putting another line into the window when you were operating. And you said you had problems communicating to command that you were actually operating down there. Let's talk about that a little bit.
There was just too much talk on the radio. And I understand the information that the trucks were trying to get through to the chief. And I talked to the chief after, a very, very good friend of mine. And I said, listen, when you were thinking about putting a line in the window, did you think maybe you could have coordinated that with the companies that were operating in the basement? Because the videos I'll send you has him saying we're going to darken it down from the outside. And not once did he call the companies that were in the cellar to ask them, hey, listen, can I do this? And, that's the one thing, and even in our books about exterior water, we're not against it, but there's certain protocols you have to follow before you apply exterior water. And that means no one near the fire area. Everybody, if it's a certain floor, everybody get below that floor. And whether it's a hand line, a tower ladder, or a blitz fire, a deck gun, a ladder pipe, those protocols still have to be met. And that didn't happen there. And there was just a lot of talk about auto extension and how they were holding the auto extension back. And to me, I was like, that's too much. Just say, listen, we're going to need a line. It's extended in the floor above. That's plenty of information to make decisions on. Not we're holding pots of water at it, trying to keep it out. I mean, there's just too much information. There's too much talk on the radio now.
You said it was auto extending. How many floors of fire above did you have?
3.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you essentially have 3 floors of fire above you.
Yes.
You have to put the fire out. So where's the second line now? The second line is operating on the first floor.
The second line went into the alley and darkened down the exterior of the building. They didn't put it in the window. They darkened down because the entire side of the building was on fire. So they darkened that down, and then they brought their line into the first floor to deal with the extension there, and subsequently a third and actually fourth line dealt with the fire on the second and third floor.
So how many lines ultimately were operating at this fire?
I believe it was 4.
That's a lot for a private dwelling to have 4 lines operating. And there were 4 lines inside the building?
One on each floor, yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, I think one came in the third floor window. I don't think there was that much extension to the third floor, but they had enough where they wanted to flow down some of those wall channels,
And even talking about something beyond a cellar fire, but let's talk about a basement fire with just the opposing line concept, where if guys commit to that stairs, making that push, it's going to take some time to make that happen. Mm-hmm. Just don't be so quick to get that second line or third line to the rear. And if you have a walkout basement, say, well, I have a direct shot right here. Once they committed, they committed. Yeah. You have to let them do the job. If not, communicate that, pull them out, and then make that your attack. But that's really hard to do once the wheels are in motion.
Well, and that's the thing is that's where the communication comes in, because if that first line is going to commit to the advance down the stairs, that second line needs to go to the top of the stairs. Where if they don't commit, the second line will probably go to that alternate means, and then the first line actually, in essence, becomes the second line to protect, because the door at the top of the stairs, make no mistake about it, is not going to be a fire-rated door. It's going to be a hollow core 6-panel door that'll burn through quite rapidly. We had the Halliday fire out in Queens where he was burned severely at a cellar fire where there was no line there. They had moved the line around to the walk-in.
With cellar fires and basement fires, many times we have utilities down there. I think that's something you should talk about a little bit as far as confirming or not confirming if the fire is involved with utilities.
So it's funny you say that, because that was one of the things I want. Once we had a pretty good handle on the fire in the cellar, I believe another member of 38 was down there, and I told Doug, I says, hey, try to isolate the utilities. A lot of times, we're lucky, a lot of times they come in through the front of the building off the street. So a lot of the meters will be right there in the front wall. and not deeper in. But sometimes you'll find utilities deeper in that building based on, where it's located within the block. But we were lucky the utilities came in through the front wall of that, and we were actually between the fire and the utilities with our lines, so that they never really played a role.
There's career fires that change you. It sounds like this was one of them. I think most cellar fires, when you have a real cellar fire, an ass-kicking job, that's one of those career fires that will change you. What are some of the takeaways for you that changed you moving forward if you got that same fire the next day?
Always take. Well, first thing, like anything else, you have to believe in your training. You got to believe that the people that are training you and telling you what to do is the right thing to do, and that showed itself that day. Believe in the people that you're with, and a funny story about my nozzle man there, the nozzle backup, same two guys I had. We had a fire maybe 8 months earlier, and I told them it was had it with Bobby Greer. Fantastic job. We had the entire flat, and we had the second 46 engine had half the flat and the floor above. And I told him, I go, that's a career fire for you. You're not going to have another fire like that for a long, long time. And then 6 months later, they're charging down the cellar stairs, But I believed in their ability, and they believed in their ability, and they believed in their officer as I believed in them. Like we said that, hey, I got you, And I think that's key as far as, that push down that, I call them the 12 feet of courage, the cellar stairs. Because that's the fight. If you can win the stairs, just becomes a tough little fight downstairs, but you got to be able to win those stairs. Communication is huge. My takeaways is, and like I said already, I think the Chiefs really have to understand they want to hear, and if they haven't heard, Timmy, are you in the cellar yet? Or 88, are you in the cellar yet? And that would have made my life a little bit easier, because as well as I do, when you're making those pushes or you're involved in a real aggressive search, your mind isn't really thinking to communicate stuff outward. Like, you know what I mean? When I finally decided to get out that we were in a cellar, the only thing that prompted that was the fact that he had said he was going to put a line. I may have never said it if he wasn't going to put a line in there. And I think that getting that information out that you're actually in the cellar and you're putting some good water downrange is a big deal. Secondary means of egress, huge. And personally, like I said, I screwed up. I never went back and verified whether there was or whether there wasn't one. And that was a big mistake on my part, that I had I asked the once and then I didn't ask again. If we had to get out of there and something lit up behind us, it would have been nice to know that there was another way out of that cellar the other way. One of the big things is relief. And what people don't realize about relief of a company at a cellar fire, especially, is that, we're below grade. And even if I have enough air left, say the vibe alert starts going off, you may not have enough air left to get out, because you got to go upstairs, and the upstairs is going to be full of smoke too. It's not like sticking your head out a window of a second floor, or you telling, hey, Timmy, just go downstairs and take a blow. I've got to get my people up the stairs, and you know how stairways are. And then I get them through the first floor, out into the front yard of the building. Before that, they run out of air. So I think that we need to be very in tune with the amount of time we've been operating at cellar fires, based on the exit time we're going to need to get out of that building, because we have to pass up through areas that are still permeated with smoke.
And another thing is CO levels. Don't be so quick to take your face piece off in a basement or cellar fire, because we're so quick to take it off. Fire's knocked down, you take it off. It's just a culture, unfortunately. But in a cellar fire, you can't do that, because you'll drop. The CO will get you instantly. So
yes, and that's the funny thing about CO. You don't know. We had a couple guys in a tank, and the CO in there was, the oxygen levels. He took one hit, they went unconscious. It took a half a second for guys to go unconscious. So I totally agree. You leave that mask on until you're out in the street breathing fresh air.
Just a little bit on that second means of egress. If you are the OV or whoever it is that goes to the rear of your building, monitor wind conditions, because if you happen to take that second means of egress and you have companies operating in that building, you drastically could change the tempo of that fire and the speed of that fire.
Yes.
And making it a wind-driven fire, even in a private dwelling. So that's something that when we get to the rear, yes, we're sizing up the building, we're sizing up for the fire, we're finding a second means of egress, but before you act on anything, size up the wind conditions, because wind can change throughout the tour. You start your tour, it's beautiful out. 2 hours later, you go out the door and you have 30-mile-an-hour winds. Pay attention to that if you are going to make drastic moves as far as the outside vent.
And I think we do a disservice, because, when we talk about wind-driven fires, we seem to always be applying it to high rises.
Yeah.
And I tell people, listen, can you have a wind-driven fire in a one-story ranch? Yes. I said the only difference between a wind-driven fire in a ranch and a 100-story building is when you get off the rig at the one-story ranch, you know what the wind condition is.
It's a great point.
The only difference, right? You know, I stand in the street looking up at a fire on the 16th floor. I have no idea what the wind is like up there, right? But I get off that rig and I'm going to vent the first floor windows. You know what the wind is. You know, and that's being that hyper vigilant. And if we're not, let's circle back. If we're not holding people accountable for what they did, why they did it, when they did it, you know, they're not going to be learning from that. And it's not pointing out mistakes. It's making yourself better, because, you know, I've never been to a fire where everything went right. You know, I challenge myself after every fire. I would tell people, I'd go up in the office and I'd bang my head on my desk. Why didn't I say this? Why didn't I do this? You know, little things would bother me to no end that I didn't do right. And you know, you go to the next fire and you'd be back up in your office, banging your head on the desk and go, why didn't I do this? Why didn't I do that?
I love going to fires more than anything in the world. I think we agree with that.
More than anything.
But
anything.
You know, a lot of times I can't enjoy it afterwards because of what you just said. You go home and you lay back in the bunk, or you're driving home. You're replaying everything you did wrong rather than really enjoying the moment. So that's the downfall of it. And I really believe that humility is the everything of success in the fire service, and that's why holding each other accountable is important.
We had a fourth alarm on Crotona Park North. It was the first fire they used the drone at. You know, they advertised drone puts out fire. I'm like, no, it didn't. You know, but we had that was in the channel rail, and I was with 27 truck, and they had the channel rail open on the 6th floor, and we're getting ready to put water down it, and we hear it's out in the hallway on the 4th floor. And I'm like, what did that guy just say? And then I hear losing the 4th floor. We're on the 6th floor. So, you know, right immediately through my mind, I'm like, okay, how's this bailout work? But I tell the guys in 88, and I raised my voice. I kind of yelled at them. I'm like, get the fuck off the top floor. Get downstairs right now. And I yelled at them to get off the top floor. And I went back in and told 27. The 42 engine got the fire, so we were fine. After the fire, one of the guys in 88 came up to me and he says, hey, Lou, what's up? He goes, I knew it was bad. And I said, how? He goes, you never raise your voice at a fire. And he goes, you raised your voice. And I took that as a compliment. I was like, wow, and then I went back to the firehouse and I was pounding my head on the desk. The one day in my career, I should have been the most calm. I yelled. That's how hard I am on myself.
I think it's a good thing you raised your voice because they took note of it and you got their attention maybe. It's funny you say that. I had a similar situation at a big H-type fire in the Cocko. So it's one of those top floor fires where it started in the Cocko. So we're just pulling ceilings. A lot of fun, but it's a dirty grunt type fire.
Yes.
Burn the roof off one wing. We're sitting there, we're hanging out. Now there's no condition. The fire's out. It's clear as day in there. And I'm standing there with the probie. The officer's over there doing something. I was a firefighter at the time. We're just standing there. And it's starting to get shitty in there again. I'm like, what the fuck's going on? Something's wrong. If you take something wrong, there's probably something wrong, and that's the takeaway from it. But I'm standing there, I'm like, why is there snot coming out of my nose now? I'm like, what the fuck's going on here? Fire dropped down from the Cocko down into the building. We're on the 6th floor of an H, and there's an apartment on the 4th floor fully involved, front to rear. So it dropped down from the Cocko and caught an entire apartment on fire. So when I hear that, we have fire on the 4th floor, Fort John, fires front to rear. It's just one of those things where if something's wrong, it probably is, and you can have fire below you. It's total out of nowhere.
And be curious. Like I tell you what, you know, when I wasn't first due or second due, and I'm, you know, they're trying to find a fire, I just didn't stand by the command post or, you know, wait for them to tell me to stretch a line. You know, if they had a line stretched looking for a fire, I already stretched. I stretched enough to cover the building. I was at the front door, you know, and chiefs would get mad. I didn't order for another line. I go, you don't have to. That's right in the books. You know, one line, I'm the backup line, you know. But I would always be curious, and I can't tell you, probably 3 times at least, you know, I end up finding the fire, just being curious, walking around looking. You know, never be out of the game. Never, like, if you're not first due, never think that, you know, like you don't have anything to add. And you know, I was always curious. And, you know, a fire up on Bainbridge, I found Holiday Avenue. I end up there on the top floor looking. I find it on the 2nd floor. You know, and we've been looking for almost 40 minutes for this fire. And it wasn't that it broke out; it was still hidden. And I was just curious and look around. So never, you know, the funny thing about letting your guard down is the fire has a funny way of letting you know he knows you're letting your guard down.
And I think something else as a good engine officer, come to the fire ready to fight. Walk up, say, Chief, 88 engine, we have a line. Where do you want it? Boom. And you get put to work.
You want to laugh?
Yeah.
I had a signal, and guys in 88 knew this. We'd be going to a fire. If we weren't first due, we were getting a line. Third due, we were getting a line. But after that, all bets are off. And I would tell guys, listen to the radio. I go, listen, guys, 1088. And that was my joke. 88's going to get a line here. So, I would walk up. I remember going to a third alarm at the top floor of H. I was the only guy with the rope. I used to carry it. If I was fourth due, I had the rope. Sometimes third due, I had the rope. And that was John Newell did. He'd carry it first due. So I always carried that rope. And I would walk up to the command post. And any young officer, you want to get put to work, this is how you do it. And I didn't tell them I had the rope. I made sure they saw it. And I would just hold it up. And when I gave the 1088 signal, I wouldn't do it over the radio. That my nozzleman knew that he had to find a rig to stretch off of. The closest rig he could get a line off of. So I'm walking up and I'd hear on the radio, 42. That's all I'd hear. So I'd walk right up to the command post. I'd hold up I said, Chief, listen, we're second on the second alarm. I said, if you need a line, I can get one off a 42 engine. And I would just turn and start walking away. And 9 times out of 10, you know what happens? Timmy, come here. Can you give me a line to the top floor? Got that, Chief.
It's so true. The time I spent in the engine was prompting the chief to put us to work, and 9 times out of 10, we were put to work. If you went there and told the chief, we're ready to go to work. Even if you're going there second due on the second alarm, whatever it is, even on the third or fourth alarm, if you're ready to go to work, the chief will put you to work if he needs you. He'll see you squared away. He'll see you ready to go.
Any fire department, not just the New York City Fire Department. Even in small volunteer places, if you show up as a mutual aid company with tools, masked up, and ready to work, they're going to put you to work. It doesn't matter how big the fire. Chiefs are looking for firemen to make all their problems go away. That's what they're looking for. And if you're ready to go to work, you're going to get some work. Simple as that.
If you happen to have a covering officer who's not so aggressive, maybe who doesn't want to go to work, it's okay as the firefighter, the senior firefighter working, and they walk up to the command post and say, Chief, 1 engine, we're here. What do you want us to do? Chief, 1 truck, we're here. What do you need us to do? Let him see that front piece, that company's here. They're dressed, ready to go to work. I'm going to put them to work.
Yep. Oh, it's 100%. 100%. That's why when you work in a neighborhood like we do, or I did, and you still do, sometimes it's hard to do that because you're surrounded by great companies, but you know where you can go and sneak your way in if you had to. But my guys knew I didn't care how you acted in the firehouse. My non-negotiables, we were going to drill. That was it. After that, I didn't care what we had for lunch. But we go out that door, you conduct yourself as a professional. If you can't do that, find another officer to work for. And most of the guys in my groups, everything I asked them to do in the Fireground, they did. Everything I asked them to do.
Circling back, it's the standard. You set a standard, you maintain that standard, the men fall in line, or they rise to that standard. If not, they find another place to work. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. I think the problem in New York is, and a lot of places now, everybody wants to be part of that, high-angle underwater bomb squad. And the engine is the last place guys want to work. And it's funny because it's probably one of the most important actions, if not the most important action to be taken on a Fireground. And that's why I loved being an engine officer. Guys, why'd you stay in the engine so long? I said, well, I had the best position as a nozzle man, and now I have the second best position on the Fireground as the engine officer. First of all, I'm the first one to the fire apartment. If I want to be the first one in the apartment, I can be the first one every time. Secondly, the decisions that engine officer makes make or break that fire. Size, placement, and operation in the first line will make or break the fire. And I loved that responsibility. And I embraced it. I had a lot of fun doing it.
I've said it multiple times, but good trucks come from great engines, and there's no doubt about that. Yep. I'm not much of an engine basher. I started in the engine. I started my career as a lieutenant in the engine. I'm a truckie by nature. I enjoy it, but I never beat up on the engine because, good engines really are what this job is about. It's the backbone of the fire service. It's a good engine.
It's like the saying that one hand washes the other. If you got, what makes a good truck, a good engine, and what makes a good engine, a good truck.
Yeah.
What makes a good second due truck, Mickey, I got you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's all, it's all wrapped into that. Is like you build off of each other. I wouldn't be able to do the things as an engine that I did if I didn't work with a good truck. And and a truck wouldn't have the confidence to do the things that they do and make the grabs that they do if it wasn't for a good engine. So, you know, if you have a poor engine and a real good truck, it weakens that truck. I don't care what anybody says. It's hard to have a house where it's a poor engine and then you have a great truck. It's just because they complement each other.
So I think the biggest takeaway from all this, beyond the tactical side of things, believing in your people. That's the bottom line. When you work in a great place with great people, you have to believe in them, and in return, they will believe in you. Tim, I appreciate you taking some time today to come on. Yeah, we'll
It's
do
always
this in the
great to
future.
talk to people that are so into the job, that love what they do. You know, it's great.
Yeah.
So
Likewise,
thank
I
you for
appreciate
having
it.
me.
We'll have you back soon. We'll do some hoarder fires next time you're on.
Perfect.
Is that cool?
That's
All
I
right,
would
man.
love to.
All right, great. I
I'd love to.
appreciate
Another
you.
challenging fire.
All right,
Take
brother.
care.
Thanks, bro.
I'll talk to you.